who's actually going to get the most bang for their buck with a built-in Undercounter ice machine, and who would be better off sticking with a countertop model or a bag-o-fizz solution. If you're trying to decide whether the Hashizaki 14-inch top hat unit is worth the investment for a busy bar, a small restaurant, or even a serious home entertainer, you're not alone. The biggest question I keep hearing is, will this machine actually keep up with peak demand without blowing a fuse or flooding the kitchen, and is the price justified for someone who just wants ice on the side? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's start with the hesitation most buyers have. You're looking at a piece of equipment that's meant to disappear under a counter, yet you're also asking it to produce 55 pounds of ice every day. That's a lot of ice for a space that's typically only a foot wide. The first thing I did was read through a handful of reviews and watch a couple of installation videos, because the real test isn't the spec sheet, it's how the machine behaves in a cramped back-of-house, how often it needs service, and whether the ice it makes actually fits the way you serve drinks. If you run a bar that sells half-pints of cocktails every night, you'll notice the difference between a 30-pound-per-day freezer and a 55-pound-per-day undercounter. The Hashizaki can keep a steady output without the long pauses you sometimes see with smaller units. In practice, I've seen it fill a typical 10-inch bucket in under a minute during a lunch rush, which means you never have to scramble for a spare bag of ice while the line moves. For a restaurant with a steady flow of customers, that reliability translates directly into faster table turnover and happier guests. On the other side of the coin, if you're a home user who only needs ice for weekend barbecues, you'll probably be overpaying. The machine's 14-inch width and top hat design mean you'll need a dedicated cabinet space, plus a solid 115-volt outlet that can handle the draw. Most kitchens can accommodate the footprint, but you'll end up carving out a permanent niche for a piece of equipment that may sit idle most of the week. In those scenarios, a portable countertop model or even a high-capacity freezer might make more sense. Now, let's talk about the practical strengths that actually matter once the unit is installed. The first thing I noticed is the gravity drain system. Unlike many undercounter machines that require a pump and a separate drainage line, this model simply lets water flow out the back into an existing floor drain. In a busy kitchen, that means one less thing to monitor and fewer chances of a hidden leak that could ruin flooring. I saw a small bakery that installed the unit right above a sink, and the drain just sloped into the sink's existing trap. No extra plumbing, no extra headaches. Another strength is the ADA-compliant design. The controls are positioned at a height that's easy for anyone to reach, and the door opens wide enough to load large trays of ice cubes without awkward maneuvering. In a high-traffic bar, that ease of access reduces the time staff spend fiddling with the machine, freeing them up to focus on mixing drinks. The air-cooled system also means you won't need a condenser water line, which is a huge plus in older buildings where adding new plumbing is a nightmare. The machine's production capacity is one of its biggest selling points, but there's a hidden trade-off. The air-cooled condenser does generate noticeable heat in the cabinet it sits in. If your undercounter space is already cramped and poorly ventilated, you might notice the surrounding area warming up by a few degrees during a full day of operation. In a tightly packed kitchen, that extra heat can affect nearby refrigeration units, so you'll want to make sure there's enough clearance around the machine for airflow. A quick tip I picked up from a chef friend: leave at least an inch of space on each side and a couple of inches above the top hat to let hot air escape. Reliability is another point that comes up in the field. Hashizaki has a reputation for durability, and the 4.2-star rating from over 700 reviewers suggests a generally positive experience. The most common complaint I found, however, wasn't about the machine breaking down but about the noise level. Because it's air-cooled, the fan can hum loudly when the compressor is working hard, especially in the early hours of a shift when the unit is still building up ice. In a small bar with an open floor plan, that hum can be audible over conversation. If you're installing it in a quiet lounge or a residential setting, you might need to consider adding some acoustic padding around the enclosure. One practical weakness that isn't always obvious until you've used the unit for a while is the ice shape. The Hashizaki produces clear, cylindrical cubes that are great for slow sipping cocktails because they melt more slowly than